Welcome back. Here are another few tidbits about the for loop. First of all, each of these three compartments doesn't really have to have something inside of them. If for this particular for loop that you're making, you don't really need some variable to be created or whatever, you can just leave this first section blank. Just make sure you at least have the semicolon there. And then if you're not going to be having a condition to be testing to end the loop, like we will see in a minute that there's a different way which you can break out of the loop instead of using this testing Boolean evaluation, then you can even leave this section also empty. And as a matter of fact, the last section 2, which is where something happens, where some action is taken, you can also leave that empty if you'd like. And as a matter of fact, this loop right over here, for example, which has no initialization, which means we're not creating any variables or anything, no test, no Boolean evaluation to see if we're ready to break out of the loop or not, and it also doesn't have any action being done in the last section, because probably we're going to be doing all the action in the middle inside of the opening and closing brace. So what's going to happen over here is this compiles good. It's good, valid C++ code, and this loop will actually continue just going and going and going and going. It's just going to loop again and again, doing the same thing over and over, because we don't have anything which is telling our program to stop looping and to continue and finish the program. Let's try it out. Compiling, linking. There we go, no problems. And as you see over here, the program is just printing out hello world again and again and again, very fast actually, and nothing is really making it stop. So in my compiler, for example, if I by mistake end up in such a situation, which is commonly known as the infinite loop because it doesn't stop, so in my compiler here I have the stop button right over here, and that makes the program to stop. So figure out in your compiler how is it that you stop a program while it's running in the debugging situation. Sometimes it's done with the keyboard keys Control and C. Sometimes if you're on a different operating system, it could be something else, Control Z, Control something else. So let's see an alternate way how you can stop the loop from going again and again if for some reason you're not using the evaluation in the for loop. So here's how it goes. This is called the break statement. You just type break and a semicolon, and what this thing does is it will break out of the nearest loop statement, or as we're going to learn, switch statement also. And when I say the nearest loop, that's because if, for example, I have a nested loop, which means I have one loop inside of the other, which could happen many times. So the only thing that this break over here will do is it will break out of this infinite loop right over here, but it's still going to be inside of the outer loop. You need to have another break statement over here which will break it out of the outer one. So the break statement will break you out of the nearest loop that you are inside. Alright, now let's move on to the while loop. The while loop is very simple. You type while and opening and closing parentheses, and then opening and closing brace. By the way, just as with the if statement, where you could really just finish the statement right on the same line and just finish it off with a semicolon, or if you'd like, you can use opening and closing braces to enclose a whole bunch of commands to be done inside of those braces. The same applies to the for loop and the while loop, as we're going to see right now. You could either use braces to enclose all of your commands inside of the of this for loop or the while loop, just like the if statement, or if you'd like, you could if it's just like one thing that has to be done, then you could just put it all on the same line and just finish it off with a semicolon and you'll be done. Okay, so the while statement goes like this. I'm sorry, the while loop, which is also a statement. Um, in here you must have, in the parentheses, you must have some sort of Boolean evaluation. You can't leave it empty. There has to be some sort of evaluation over here, whether something should be true or not. So as you can imagine, what this loop does is, as long as whatever is inside here is true, we will continue looping. If at some point it becomes false, then automatically we stop looping and we continue whatever's after the loop. And of course you can use the break statement like we said before. So like, for example, if we made a Boolean still play, and then we evaluate if still play is true. Let's say at the beginning it's still true, and do the game function. So this is a typical way how you would probably evaluate if you should continue playing your game or not. While still play, while our Boolean variable is still true, then we will continue doing the game. We will call the function which does the game, and then we'll do that again and again and again. If at some point during the game the player will choose to stop playing, then you will probably set this variable to false, and at that point the next time we will loop through the while loop and this is going to be false, then we just continue and finish the program after the closing brace. So again, the while loop works like this. We evaluate this expression over here and we check if it's 0 or false, or if it's any other value like true or 1 or -1, etc. If it's true, then we do whatever is inside over here, whatever it may be. And then once we're done, we start all over again. We check while this is true. As long as this is still true, we're going to loop again and again and again. Once this becomes false, then we skip ahead and we continue later on. So as I was saying before, over here for example, if it's just doing one little thing, you could just put it all in one line and you don't need to use the braces. And of course, as we learned about all these all different types of complicated comparison operators like more than or less than and stuff like that, you could put over here a whole long type of expression, whatever it is you'd like to evaluate, if still play is true, and also if x is more than 189, or if my bool is still true, etc., stuff like that. Remember to use parentheses to envelop your things a lot clearer, so that we know what happens first and what happens later on, because as we learned, and will mean that these two things have to be true, or will mean these things will have to be true as well, and then it could get a little confusing if this involves only this, or if it involves everything. So make sure you use parentheses to make things clear exactly what would like to be tested against what, and that'll make your code a lot easier to understand and to read. Another very similar loop that's very much like the while loop is the do while. The do while goes like this: do, opening and closing brace, and then while, and then opening and closing parentheses. So it's very much like the while loop, because it will test whether what's inside over here is true or not, and if it is, then it'll continue looping. If it's not true, then it won't. It'll stop and it'll continue the rest of the program. The only difference is that over here you are sure that the loop will at least do the stuff inside of the braces at least once. If you remember with the while loop, the first thing that the while loop does is that it will test what is inside of the parentheses, and if it's true or false will depend if it'll ever at all execute what's inside the braces. So it's very possible that in the while loop we'll never do what's inside of the braces, not even once. With the do while loop you are sure that it will execute what's inside of the braces at least once. Oh, and don't forget to add your semicolon at the end of the parentheses. So have fun and play around with these loops and see what they do.